It's good to be here. Good morning. Good morning. I am so excited to be here. I just want you to know, I hear of your good deeds. I've gotten to meet some of you over the years, and this week, Pastor Troy and I were chatting, and I'm like, it's awesome to hear what's happening here. I live up on the other side of Camp Pendleton in Orange County, and so it's so good to be here. I want today to ask you a question. Will you say with me, I like giving? All right, now turn to your neighbor and say, yes, you do. All right, well, we're going to talk a little bit about the generous life. I've been studying the generous life for nearly 15 years, and there's several things that I've learned, and I think whether you're someone who gives a lot all the time, or someone who's kind of a giver, or someone who thinks it's a really dumb idea, there's something today I think that you'll be able to take to apply tomorrow, next week, and then even something to take and create a habit as you go forward in the future. So before we jump into that, I just want to take you back to, I'm 9 years old. And I was the oldest of 5. My grandpa owned a large commercial baking company. And we went Saturday morning to make 16 special loaves of bread at his office. And I'm thinking, this is going to be so good, you know. Fresh bread, and Brad and Grandpa, I mean, we're just going to have like slices of bread and jam, and you're with me, right? And well, those come out of the oven and they cool down, and just when I think it's time to get into some fresh bread for Brad, they go into the trunk of the car. And off we go to our first stop, and we pull into this widow's home, and he had met her through church, and he brings that fresh loaf of bread to her, and he squeezes it in her face. So good for you. And poor Gramps didn't get the memo on white bread, but the idea was the spirit of generosity. And as we left, he said, you know, it was important that I was there to be generous with my words. Well, the next stop, there was a white envelope and a few more loaves of bread, and this time, as we pulled away from the man's home, he said he has a specific financial need, and so Grandpa modeled being generous with money. And then he would stop there and say, you know, giving is good. Every time you do it, it softens your heart. You become more like Jesus. And so then the next stop, I'm thinking, we've got to make a pit stop here. It's time for the fresh loaf of bread before, and we didn't. The third stop was a few more loaves of bread. And this time, he was helping the person get connected to get an opportunity because he had influence. And he explained to me that being generous with influence is very important. And as the morning rolled on, he showed me generosity of sharing stuff. He showed me generosity of attention. I don't know, that's one right now the Lord's really got me convicted on. I have this 6-ounce device that slides into my back pocket, front pocket somewhere, and it rattles and hums, dings, whatever. And I want to be more fully present. I want to be generous with my attention. And then he showed me how you can be generous with your time. And so Grandpa modeled these different ways for me. And then I went into business for a number of years. And in 2005, I was on a run in Michigan and felt like the Lord said, I'm going to use you to encourage people. And they're giving. You're going to bring greater hope and joy to many people. And I didn't quite know what to do with that. But I went home and journaled it. And then I started pulling people together to talk about the generous life. And I found that stories and this conversation wasn't really happening, but stories were a powerful way to move people to find opportunities to give. And so I started this organization, and now I spend my days inspiring generosity across the country and in great churches and businesses and with families. I want to ask you a question. What do you think about when you think about generosity? What do you think about when you think about generosity? If you're anything like me, you know, I've had times where I thought generosity just meant money. And as Grandpa said, and God shows us it's important to give money, but do you ever think, like I've thought, that it's a duty, it's an obligation? If I don't do it, God's going to like me less? Maybe you think fun. Maybe you think, I've had a bad experience. I've had someone take advantage of my generosity. But oftentimes we have thinking around it that may be a little different than what God would have. And I want to read a passage this morning out of Philippians. Philippians 4 says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Think about such things. And whatever you've learned or received from me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. When I think of those things, I think they just all things generosity. Is it true? Is it kind? And so my challenge this morning would be, would you be willing to go with me on a little adventure over these next 35 minutes to maybe perhaps get a fresh perspective of what generosity is? Perhaps the gift of perspective that I can give you today is a fresh insight. And you know, God's not going to be mad at you if you happen to have some wrong thinking or wrong teaching or anything like that around generosity. I just want to encourage you to consider being open to the generous life and the broad ways that we can be generous. And so the first thing I want to share with you is the idea of awareness. I would submit we have to get our antennas working to look for opportunities to give. Grandpa modeled that. And then he took me on that Saturday morning, and we experienced generosity in so many different ways. In Galatians 6:10, Paul says, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those that are our brothers and sisters in the Lord." And I love that. As I've studied that and I learn more about opportunity, he's saying privilege. We get to give. We get invited into opportunities. But I think we have to get our antenna working. For our family, our antenna was working back in several years ago. And we lived in Michigan at the time, Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was a Sunday morning. I went down, I got our newspaper back when people actually read those. And there was a little picture of a Sudanese father and son. And as I read the article, I realized that they were firebombed out of their village. They lost friends. They lost family. They had clothes on their back, and they had a few bikes. As I read further, I realized that someone had come along and stolen their bikes, and that was how Dad got to work, and that was the son's main toy. And I thought, this is crazy. So I brought it into our house. At the time, we had 10, 7, and 2-year-olds. And I read the article. I said, what should we do? And my oldest son said, we got to go get them bikes. We got to go get them bikes. And I'm like, you're right. We got to go get them bikes. Now, in my marriage, I married somebody opposite. I don't know if any of you have done that. So I'm the ready, fire, aim guy, activator. We're going to make this happen. Solution guy. My wife's the planner. So her idea of a surprise party is 30 days of planning and having it all perfect. And so we somehow got into the car, went to the bike store, put the bikes in the back of the car, and as we pulled to the first stoplight, she looked over and said, where do they live? You're starting to get a picture already. You might hear another story today. Guys, we need to listen to our wives. They're smart. They have intuition. I make it so much harder than it needs to be. But anyway, we didn't know where they lived. We spent 4 hours driving all over this city. And finally, when we found them, all the dad could say is, I like bike, I like bike, I like bike. And we're like, okay, cool. And as we drove away, my wife said, you know what? I think God had an assignment for us today. Our antennas were working. Our kids got to see it. From the back of the car, my son said, Dad, that was way better than us going to the water park today. You see, Jesus' truth that it's more blessed to give than receive. It's so powerful. I think part of the reason I'm giving my life away to this work is I want families, I want kids to experience those ideas early on in life, especially in the culture we live in. I mean, come on, I know I'm just on the other side of Camp Pendleton from you, but I live miles from ground zero of materialism. We call it Fashion Island. And I like shiny objects. I've bought them. I get it. But I think there's something powerful about becoming aware that as much fun as it is to get, it is so much better to give than receive. I told my buddy Scott one day, I said, told him the bike story. He texts me, I like cavities. A couple weeks later, I'm like, what in the world? I'm not a dentist, and clearly I knew he wasn't. And he said, well, I was sitting at my dentist's office, and I overheard a single mom say, $926. I can't cover it. I've got these 3 young girls. My husband left me, and he said, I just kept hearing, I like bike in my head. And he's like, you know me, I'm introverted. I don't even know if I like people. But he said, I just jumped up, that like activated. And so I said, ma'am, would you please forgive me for eavesdropping? And he said, I handed her my credit card. When I'm with Dave Ramsey, I say debit card. He likes that better. But he said, tears began to flow down this person's face. He said, you know, in Galatians, it talks about bearing each other's burdens, but your bike story got my antenna working in a way that I could see and hear what was going on around me. I mean, I just learned this morning that a couple high schoolers had their antennas working, and it led to Toys for Hope, and there's a lobby full of them, and there's money money that has been given, and it's not done yet. What? That's you guys already. You guys are already in on this. But I would say generosity inspires generosity. And I say it because God said it. And so I think we've just begun. I think we can always grow and be stretched in the ways that we can give. And when I give, boy, is that it's better for me. And I want it better for you too. So the second thing that I've learned is the idea of action. So it's one thing to have awareness and be inspired, but we get to act. And we get joy from that. You know that passage in Philippians, that I just read? That's the joy of giving chapter. You know where that was written? In jail. I get a lot of joy from giving, but I've never gone to jail for my giving. That's a powerful thing that's talking. He's there saying, look, I'm not asking you or talking to you about generosity for my benefit. I care about what gets put to your account, he shares later in that passage. And that's me. I'm not here asking you for money for me today. I care about you experiencing joy in your giving, and I experience you having treasure sent on ahead. And so that second point, action. You know, for our family, we regularly give to our church. And rather embarrassing story on this, I'm supposed to be the giving guy, right? And my wife and I are talking one day, and we realize I thought she was giving to our church regularly. She thought I was giving to our church regularly, and you know where this is headed. So nobody's given to the church regularly in our house. And so we're like, Lord, we're sorry, and we went into that automated giving thing because you realize you travel and life happens. And so I would just encourage you to pray about engaging that way at a minimum so that you're kind of just in that habit of giving. It was one of those crazy conversations because I said, what, you're not doing that? You're not doing that? It was all kind of one of those pointing things. And then we just realized that automated deal is really, really good. But we also made a decision as a family to change some of our spending so we would have more margin to give. And what we decided to do is we called it our emergency giving fund. And it was for these kinds of opportunities like toys and bikes and other opportunities that would come our way because our antennas are up, we're listening, we're looking, and we told our kids, we can't solve everything that comes our way, but if you see something, would you please bring it to us? We can talk about it, we can process this. And so my oldest son came to us and he said, my buddy Nolan, his dad just found out he has 2 months to live, and is there something our family could do? And we talked about it, and we thought, a prepaid Visa card, clearly they're going to have some unexpected expenses that we wouldn't know about. We just want to take care of that. And so we were going to do one of these stealth giving deals where you put it in an envelope, don't sign it, and you go off to their house. And we turned down the street, and there's a bank of mailboxes there. And my wife's like, perfect, we'll just put it in the bank of mailboxes that we don't have to go up to their front door. We won't get caught. And I'm like, no, I heard that, postmen are stealing things out of mailboxes. And, so we went to the front door, and I got busted. Again, listen to your wife. It's a good idea. So that our cover was blown. So they knew it was us. And several months passed, and that doctor was right. That man passed away. 3 weeks later, a note came to our house. Dear Brad and Laura, my husband Tom was pacing back and forth in the living room, asking the Lord to provide money so he could put new tires on my car so I would be safe when he went to heaven. The creator of the universe works through us to be a part of answering prayer. But I would submit we have to have our antenna working, and we should be making that pre-decision to want to grow in our generosity and to be in a position to be able to have space to do it. I don't know what the language is like in heaven, but maybe he'll say, I like tires if I bump into him on the streets up there. I don't know. But I know this, I was able to be a part of helping a family because we were modeling something to our kids. And what I didn't share with you is that maybe 4 months earlier, I was in a doctor's office, and they said to me, do you know why you're here? Which is never really a great lead-in question. And I said, well, somebody didn't like some blood results. And they said, well, you're right about that. You have a rare form of leukemia. And my whole life flashed in front of my eyes. They told me I'd have 2 years to live without a expensive treatment, and it might work. And I don't know if you've had your life flash in front of your eyes, but I would suggest that if you haven't, you will. And if you have, you know what I'm talking about, where you start to think about, where's my hope? And I was able to recognize my hope was in the Lord Jesus. And yet I also recognized that we had made a decision to want to live generously, regardless of what was going on in our environment. Because sometimes, even though we live in sunny California, the sun's not always out. Sometimes storms of life come and clouds are out. And I think I would have chickened out in that environment if we hadn't made that decision. And so I want to challenge you to make a decision to want to become more generous. And then you get to bring these opportunities with you of living the generous life when you go to the doctor's office and when you navigate these storms. So for me, I go to UCLA quite regularly, and you go up there and they take all this blood and money from you. And one day, this lady doing it, she's taking the blood. Her name's Joy. Okay, some people have the wrong name for the job, right? I mean, my sons were telling me the other day, like, the guy that invented the Victorian toilet, his name was Crapper. Now, that seems to fit better. But the person, sorry, Pastor, we'll find out if that makes the second service. And you could tell she was having a bad day, and I was feeling sorry for myself, and I thought that nobody notices that. I don't know, have you ever noticed that? You're having a bad day, and you think, nobody really can tell that I'm in a foul mood. They can. Just let you know. And so I said, hey, Joy, you ever go get one of those big 910-calorie Starbucks drinks with all the drizzle and whipped cream and with a friend and just go for it, get loaded up on all that sugar? And she's like, looks at me kind of peculiar. Oh, yeah, I would do that. And so she was labeling up all my blood. I slid one of those gift cards down on her chair. And as I got to the door, I said, "Hey, Joy, have fun with your friend," as I headed out, and a smile broke across her face. And I just thought, giving changes everything. It's the fastest way to flip out of a bad mood. It's the fastest way to flip off of thinking about what you don't have. Try it. You'll see. It's absolutely a powerful thing, because we were created for this. We were created in God's image. Troy said, "For God so loved the world that he gave." He gave us life. He created us this way, and then he gave us his son, Jesus, for salvation. And so my doctor up there at UCLA, now he is a piece of work. And that's generous with my words, okay? This guy knows everything. Just ask him. And so one day I went in his office and he said, "I don't see any sign of that disease in your body." And I'm like, "Oh my word, doc, it's a miracle, And then he says, "I like your shoes." And I'm thinking, we went from miracles to shoes that fast. So then he starts talking about the buckle. I wore them for you today. And that started to get a little weird. But then when he went into the stitching and talking about that, I'm like over the line of weird. So I said, "What are yours, like size 10? Oh, you think you're so smart. They're 9.5. And I'm like, "You're so dumb. You just gave the giving guy the answer." Because a little bit about me, I'm Dutch, but I like nice. So I go to Nordstrom Rack. So I thought, I'll go back. So I went back to Nordstrom Rack, walked down that aisle, and there they were, 9.5 on the shelf. So I bought them. I brought them home and I wrote him a note. "Dear Doc, thank you for using your God-given gifts to help a guy like me stay around a little longer." And then I think Jesus is okay with this snarky comment I wrote at the back. And I said, "These will help you be one step more like me." Oh my goodness. Oh, he called me like a week later and he's like, "You're crazy. You think that a generous world is a better world for all of us." And I said, "I do." It's interesting. This past summer, I was on a plane. My son Drew has a random conversation with a guy that wasn't random at all. We ended up meeting up for coffee a few weeks later, and one thing led to another. And I ended up talking to some guy named Norm. And Norm and I had this great conversation about our work and what he does. And within 2.5 weeks, he had said, "I'm sending you up to JH Ranch." I was very unfamiliar. "I'll sponsor it. I'll take care of it." And by the way, I don't work for JH. This is fascinating, the integration of me being here this weekend in this story. And so my son and Drew and I went up there. And we came back, and I was like, I have never had an experience where I felt a reconnection with God, a integration with Scripture for kind of how to do that more and more daily. And for Drew and I to have more of a connection. And it's so fun to hear the challenge that you talk about, because I'm sending my assistant and her husband next year. My oldest son and I are going to go back. Kind of a funny story on that. I'm not really a camping guy. Maybe you picked that up by now. And so anyway, the beds are too short. Let's just go with that. Well, we're leaving, and I'm like, good, got that done, box checked. I'm got the camping thing out of the system. And so Drew says, "Well, you and Dan need to go." It's my 20-year-old. I'm like, "Oh, no, he's going to be 21. He's kind of old." He's like, "No, you guys need to go." I'm like, No, this is for you and I. We don't want to. I said, "We're good." He's like, "No, you're not. You guys have stuff. It'd be really good to go." So you know what? We're going to go next June. So I'd encourage you to consider being part of a way that you could help that generosity ripple. I thought it was interesting to hear you guys talk about it, as we're now sending several people up there because we had a chance to do that ourselves. The third thing I want to share with you, so awareness to action, but now impact. Jesus said, "Let your light shine before men, that they'll see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." One of my favorite ways to kind of vet a giving opportunity is to just ask a question. So one day I was reading about widows and orphans, and I thought, where do I find a widow? My grandparents were gone, so I thought, oh, when I'm getting my hair cut, I'll ask the lady. So you know how that is, you're like tips upside down, they're shampooing your hair, and you sit up, and I'm a little dazed, and I said, where do I get a widow? It came out a little funny. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, we want somebody just to help. We just anonymously want to. So we started sending money to this 88-year-old lady named Evelyn. And we thought we'd see her in heaven. But then she turned 92, and so after 4 years of all these anonymous checks being cleared, we thought we should probably go meet her. And so we did. She stands this tall. She's got silver flowing hair. She's just joyful, wonderful lady. And we heard that she was running out of money and taking less medicine just to get by, and we were able to help fill in some of that gap. And at that time, our work at I Like Giving was expanding. You see, our mission at I Like Giving is to inspire people to live generously. So we do that in content. We do that through speaking at businesses. I was at this business, and the report came back that one of the employees that I was talking to about being generous with our words, he decided to take that home. And a few days later, his wife was like, what happened? What's going on with you? And he said, I was just more generous with my words. And so he was thanking his boss, who was telling me, like, how great is this that I went to work, and we were trying to learn about how we could be more, live the generous life and have a generous culture in our company. But it stuck, and he took it home and started being affirming to his wife. It's powerful, powerful stuff. So Evelyn, I called her one day and I said, I just got a phone call from a publisher, and they want me to write a book. And I cheated in high school English. I told them, I'm not your guy. And they said, no, we can help people like you. So I wanted to put Evelyn in the story, or in the book, and she's like, I don't understand what the fuss is all about. I'm like, Evelyn, that's why this is so cool. So now she's like 97 at the time, and I just want to read a couple sentences from her story, because I've learned so much about generosity from Evelyn, who didn't have a ton of worldly wealth and yet understood this principle. She said, tears ran down my cheeks, and I felt deeply grateful. And at that moment, I knew what I needed to do. You see, money is like a river. It's meant to keep on moving. Evelyn, we found out, was giving money out of what we were giving her away. I want to give these to you. You can keep one and give one if you want to. Okay, yeah, they're a fun gift book. So they're just full of like 44 short stories from different perspectives. He's already putting it into action. I mean, you can't ask. We didn't even set that up. That's perfect. I love that. So anyway, Evelyn, we captured a story called I Like Being 98. So I'd like you to remember the words, I like giving. You said them earlier. It's on the front of the book. If you just add .com on that, go there this afternoon or tomorrow, and you'll learn more about us, and you'll be able to watch Evelyn. And you can sign up there too if you want. We'll send you a couple inspiring stories every month. It's a way to continue to get you new ideas and excitement. Evelyn's story has been viewed over 9 million times around the globe. I licensed her story to National Geographic. They don't have any necessary faith perspective, and yet her picture of a generous life, they wanted to show that to other people. So when I think about generosity and impact, I also think about our own family. And like, what would it be like? How could I help you, connect with our family that way? And my 16-year-old son, who's going on 26, that makes for an interesting parenting challenge, is with me today. And I'm going to ask him to come up to share just a couple thoughts on his perspective on being around this in our house.
Hello. Oh, hi. I'm so good to be here today. Today I want to share with you a little bit about what it's been like for me being around the conversation. You're probably wondering, how does this work? Does it work with his kids or his kids listening? And today I just want to share a little bit about what it's been like for me and how it's affected my friends and how they're starting to give because of it. I can remember headed to golf practice one day, and I was on the back of the bus, and I was kind of poking fun at this kid that had a disability, and my friends were too, and I kind of sat there, and while my friends were poking fun at him, I kind of sat there and didn't say anything. And as I got off the bus that day and saw it disappear in the distance, I thought to myself, man, I was as bad as my friends. I didn't say anything. I didn't stick up for him. So fast forward 2 months, I was in the first day of high school, and I'm sitting there in my first class, and I kind of felt like God was telling me, Drew, I want you to look out for that kid that you didn't stick up for. And all these thoughts are going through my head, right? Am I going to make friends? Are there any cute girls? Am I going to get good grades? And that thought came into my mind. And so I'm like, okay, God. And so I'm kind of looking around, and there was this kid right next to me, thick glasses, very short. And I knew he was my guy. So I walk over, and I'm like, hey, I'm Drew. And he's like, hey, I'm Tim. And then it got quiet, and I'm like, darn it, I hate quiet circumstances. And so when I'm in one, I tell a joke. So I was like, hey, Tim, why did the golfer have 2 pairs of pants? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, because he had a hole in one. So weeks after weeks, I just kept telling funnier jokes, and a friendship started to happen. I'd see him in the hallways. Hey, Quinn, have a good day. I would sit with him at lunch, help him with his homework, be his friend. And then one day, I realized that my friends were starting to catch on to this, because I looked down the hallway one day, and Tim's coming from one direction, and my other friend's coming from the other direction, and my friend put out his hand and said, hey, Quinn, have a good day. And I realized that in that moment, my one decision to step into Tim's life was affecting my friends. They were starting to do it themselves. Parents often ask me, Drew, how do I bring this into my kids' lives? How do I bring this into my grandkids' lives? So I came up with an acronym, MEE, M-E-E. Model, then encourage, lastly engage. Let's take it back. Model. When you model generosity to your kids, they'll follow. I followed in my parents' footsteps. My dad has followed in his grandpa's footsteps. I believe that when those seeds are planted, they'll be there forever. So just model it yourself. Do it yourself, and they'll see it, and they'll want to do it themselves too. The next is encourage. Encourage your kids to give. Give them opportunities to step into, but don't force it. When you force giving, that's not good. It goes wrong. Don't force it. And then engage. Engage in the conversation. Share your stories around the dinner table. Talk about it, because I have kids that come up to me all the time, and they go, Drew, hey, I don't even know what giving means. So a lot of my generation believes it's just writing the big check or just charity. And a lot of kids don't even know what it means. So I would challenge you, define it for your family. Make it part of your legacy and lifestyle, because that's what's truly important. And I believe that this can be part of not only your life, but your kids' lives as well. But you have to model it. And it has to start with you, because we know generosity inspires generosity. So when you share your stories with someone, they'll be encouraged by it, and they'll want to do it themselves. It's a really exciting week. It's been a really exciting week, because over the last year and a half, I wrote a book with my dad called Everyday Generosity, which we'll have out and back, all around the idea, because parents and kids have been coming up to me, hey, I want to hear from your perspective. I want you to help me lean into this every day. So I wrote this book and with him, and our insights and our stories are woven through to help bring this into perspective on how we can do this every day and how we can make it a lifestyle for ourselves. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, just so put you on the spot a little bit, but you saw all the JH, like,
oh, yeah.
What is your one takeaway from our week up there?
Yeah.
Beyond, well, we won't tell that story.
So I went to JH Ranch, and he's not a big camp guy, like he said. Like, it's way out of, like, camp, the word has, like, all these triggers. So we went to camp.
Okay, wait, I'm looking for your,
I know.
okay, yeah.
So we got up there, and
Jeez.
I mean, for us, we have a good relationship, and I think the one important part that I really leaned into was the importance of intentionality. When we're intentional with not only leaning into God's word and leaning into learning about each other, that's what's important. And being intentional and having time, because I'm learning that we do have time that we really set aside and hang out with each other and we speak together and do all these things. But a lot of my friends, like, it's a high and by with their dad, and it's not intentional. And for me, the intentionality is my daily use of the Bible and diving into it every day. And it will challenge you and it will stretch you and it's uncomfortable, but it's something that I truly believe that will change your relationship because it really has helped ours so much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good job, Jared. So we talked about the idea of being generous with our words, and I told you that there'd be a way, even today, you'd be able to put this into action. So we're going to put up a little slide. It's called the affirming word opportunity. Now, I'll model it so nobody has to freak out. But you look at the list, there's many other words that you could be generous with. But here's what it would look like. Pastor Troy, I admire your faithfulness in following the call to plant a church 5 years ago. I have a heart for church planters. As I meet more who have done it, it's not an easy assignment. But look at today, from a small group to multiple services, so thank you for being faithful. Now, I kind of went on long there, but you can just quickly say, hey, I appreciate this about you. If you're alone, text somebody, and then you get to have this fun conversation in about an hour. Why did you text me an affirming word? But the idea is you're sitting with somebody who maybe you could say this to, and we'll just take 15, 20 seconds to engage with this, and it works. So go for it. We got 20 seconds. We'll go for it. Okay, no kissing back there. That's not the point. I got the hugger in the center row here, so that it's more of a verbal affirming word, not the physical. We're at church, for crying out loud. So if you're with oh, man. It's working. There's a few people. There's one Mr. Arms Crossed. I'm not even going to look at him, but all right. Now, doesn't that feel good to receive an affirming word, right? Did it feel good to give it? What if we every day were intentional about being generous with our words? Some of you haven't heard some of those things in a while. So I just challenge you, easy. It wasn't even money today. When I think about this morning, we had an opportunity to talk about awareness and move to action and trust God for the impact. And whether it's someone who sent us to JH and experience that it did for my son and I, or it's a couple people catching a vision in high school for a toy drive. One of the things I learned about you guys and your generosity is last month, or October it was, y'all chipped in at over $25,000 to Convoy of Hope. You're already in this generosity thing, but can I just challenge you? What would it look like to continue to become more generous as a church as you daily, weekly, monthly invade this community? I learned about the Free Slice Thursday. I thought I heard it all. I mean, that's a neighboring school nearby that they come over and get a slice of pizza, and there's conversation, and there's people just showing love. So I'm excited about what you guys are doing, and I'm excited that I could be here today. So in closing, I want to share with you a note that I got from my grandpa after he passed away. And I found it in some notes. It said, "Dear Brad, Winston Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. I think this is well worth remembering. Love, Gramps." And I think it's well worth remembering for you as well. You are in a great church, and it was an honor to be here this morning and to look forward to perhaps saying hello to you outside.